Hello, everybody. I am Alessandro Mautone. A bit of introduction about myself. As you can see, besides paragliding, I'm an Android engineer, and I currently work at WeTransfer, which is a website where you can easily send files from A to B. And we have different products within the company. This is one of the products, Collect. So I am an Android engineer on both WeTransfer and Collect. Collect is an app where you can gather content. You can organize it in boards. We try to make it beautifully from a visual point of view. And then you can even share it with friends and collaborate in real time. So yeah, enough about myself. Now let's dive into the talk itself, which is how to effectively create and review pull requests. So let's start by the definition of what is a pull request. According to the official documentation from GitHub, a pull request is something that lets you tell others about changes you have pushed to a branch in a repository on GitHub. Once a pull request is opened, you can discuss and review the potential changes with collaborators and add a follow-up commit before your changes are merged into the base branch. So let's keep in mind this definition because it's going to come back during the talk. Especially the keywords collaborating and reviewing. So the talk is mainly done in 3 steps, which is we're going to first discuss how big should be a PR. Then we are going to discuss how to fill up, the description of the PR. And then finally, we're going to discuss how to review the PR. So the first 2 points are going to be when we are on the side of the author of the PR, while the third point is going to be when we are on the reviewer side of the PR. So let's start with the PR sites. Here we have a nice meme. And this is basically key of the talk. It's very important. Why the PR site is very important? Let's see. The PR size, first of all, should be as small as possible. There is not really a specific number of lines or of files that we should aim for. Instead, we should aim for small tasks and a very defined and small scope. And I'm saying this because usually, some changes don't really count towards the final size of the PR. For example, you can move some files from a package to another, and that's something very easy to review. You can maybe add some new models related to the backend. That's also something very easy to review. And we can just mention that in the PR description to make the life easier for the reviewer. We're going to see soon. So the benefits of having a small PR are you have a short feedback loop, which means it's going to be easier to address any changes, because if you have 2 changes, in the worst case, you're going to have 2 feedbacks. If you have 100 changes, you can have 100 comments, and that's going to be hard to follow up for both the author and the reviewer. Then you are going to also have a better focus, especially from the reviewer point of view, because there are small changes, so the reviewer can focus properly on what's going on in the PR. And then finally, you can address any changes earlier, which means less refactoring. Again, let's consider you changing 100 things. You can have potentially 100 refactoring to do. If you have only 2 changes, you're going to have a small set of feedback and consequential refactoring. In order to understand this better, we can go through an example, which is building a feature. I am pretty sure every one of us has been there. So we're going to build a feature where we need to call an endpoint from a RESTful service, perhaps. We're going to parse that response. We're going to store some data, perhaps in a database. And then finally, we're going to either build or update the UI. So if you have a screen already, you can update the UI. If you need to build a screen from scratch, you're going to build the UI. So in a not ideal scenario, everything is done into a single PR. So we're going to add let's say we use retrofit. We're going to add the interface to define the RESTful call. Then we're going to add the parsing for the responses, the models for the responses, perhaps also for the body request if we have a body request to pass, and so on. So the possibility, this is off, it's working. The possibility of big feedback from the reviewer or large changes requests. Yeah. So the possibility. Cool. It's working? No. Now? No. Test? No? I can be loud enough, it's okay. I need to remember where I was. No, yeah, okay. So you have the possibility of having big feedback here from the reviewer, as we mentioned before. So you're going to have a large change request, which are going to be hard to address. Again, both for the author of the PR and the reviewer. So this is affecting both sides. Another possible outcome of this not ideal scenario is that there is possibly a lack of attention from the reviewer because there is so much going on, so they're not going to be able to keep up with everything, and that's also going to lower the quality of the code base, which is something we don't want. A better approach will be opening a PR for the endpoint business logic. So in this case, we can group the first 2 points. We can also add the models for the backend and maybe the parsing logic. Usually, we can mention that there are models from the backend, and those are easy to review. Then we can have a PR for the data storing. So in this case, again, let's say we are storing the data in the database. This can become quite big, right? Because you need a query, perhaps. You need your repository classes, interfaces, test. So you might think it's a small change at the beginning, but then it's going to become big. So splitting those things is going to make everything easier. And then finally, we can have one for the UI. Again, this one can be, if it's a screen built from scratch, can be quite big. But even if the UI is there, it can be quite big change. You need to introduce, I don't know, some live data, for example, some flow, some new state. And so splitting all those 3 things is going to be way nicer for the reviewer and also for you as an author. So we now covered the PR sites point. And now we're going to dive into the description, which is kind of linked to some of the previous points. The PR description should communicate clearly what we worked on. So it will be nice if we can fix, if we can link the issues we fixed, if we have a tracking system like GitHub or Jira. We should also mention what the PR is achieving, etc. So if we're fixing a bug, we can tell what we're fixing. It's also a good place to give a heads up to the reviewer. So this is linked to what we were talking before. For instance, if we notice that the lines of code changes are quite big, but we actually moved a few classes around, and it's a non-trivial thing to review, we can let them know, and so it's going to help setting up the expectations, which brings us to the third point. Again, let's say we're parsing a response, and we added a bunch of models from the backend. If you have also a well-documented backend, this is very easy to review, so it's not going to really contribute to the size of the PR. And it's very nice if we mention those things because it's going to set expectations to the reviewer. So I don't know about you guys, but something I do personally is try to review the PRs at the start of the day and at the end of the day. But sometimes, especially if I'm requesting changes, I keep an eye on the PR in order to unblock the author of the PR. And if I know the PR is small enough, maybe I can take a break after lunch, and it's not the wrong answer, and review the PR. What about PR descriptions with designs? So what we spoke about when building a screen or updating a UI. If the PR includes new designs, it would be nice if you can include screenshots or maybe even videos if there is a loading state we need to showcase. Another good thing, depending on your process, something we do is tagging the designers. What we usually do is this is not blocking, so if we get approvals from the developers, we still merge the PR, but the designers are going to review this eventually, and if they have feedback, we can address this later. And then finally, we use GitHub. So I have a few tips about GitHub. You can use the power of the Markdown to structure your screenshots, for example. So something we do is whenever we update one screen and there is a before and an after state, we create a nice table with a before and after state. At the beginning, it can be time-consuming if you are not familiar with the Markdown language, but it's going to become very easy and natural with the time. Another GitHub tip is that if you write fixes and then you put the link of the GitHub issue is going to be automatically closed whenever the PR is merged, which is something pretty nice because you don't need to remember to manually close the issue. I try to automate whatever I can. This is possible with Jira as well. It's a bit more, this works out of the box with GitHub, but with Jira you need to do some integration, but it's possible there as well. And I'm pretty sure it's possible with other tools as well. And another GitHub tip, which I am also pretty sure works with other tools like Bitbucket, it's creating a PR template. So you can, talking about GitHub, you can easily create a file which you're going to put in the .github folder, I believe, in the repository with a specific name. And what is written there is going to fill the PR automatically whenever you try to open one. This is pretty nice because it's a very simple change you can add to the code base. But then whenever a developer is going to open a PR, before opening it, they're going to see the template with all the things that they need to fill. So we currently have this template that you can see there. Not everything is mandatory. Usually we have a ticket for everything, so that's usually filled. The description will be nice to put it, unless you are fixing something very obvious that it's already covered by the title. And yeah, screenshots and steps to reproduce are not always filled. For example, if I'm adding something for the database, I'm not going to put screenshots because there is nothing about that. And steps to reproduce, we usually do that whenever we want to let them, the reviewers know how to test what we did. A nice to have, it's review your own PR. This is also something that can sound a bit of time consuming, but after opening your PR, if you go through the files of your PR, so you actually review your PR, you can notice a few mistakes that you did, happened to me in the past. And this is actually going to save you time, because instead of waiting for the reviewer to request changes, you're going to see that immediately and then fix it right away. So actually what I do usually is I open the PR in the draft mode, I check it quickly, and then I put it in ready for review. The potential benefits are that indeed you are going to detect some errors potentially. And another really nice thing that we try to do in our team, it's comment in advance in places where we think something will trigger questions or is not clear enough. So I don't know, maybe there is something where you know that some questions are going to be triggered because it's a tricky part of the code, or because maybe the reviewer is missing context. And in those cases, you can comment in advance. And in the best case, you're going to have a question already answered. In the worst case, you just lost a minute commenting something. But usually it's very useful. So yeah. We covered the PR description point, and now the last one we have is the PR review. So now we're going to move from the author side of the PR, and we're going to be the reviewers. So first of all, let's start with something very simple. What is the outcome of a PR? We can have 3 possible outcomes, which are requesting changes, commenting, and approving. And we want to see now when to use those. Requesting changes usually should be a no-brainer whenever there is something that is clearly wrong with that code base. So it's maybe mining the stability of the code base. For example, there is a crash, or it's not really in line with the guidelines agreed within the team. For example, some business logic was added, but tests are missing. In that case, I think you should request changes. And a note about requesting changes, you shouldn't be afraid to do so, because this is not something negative. You are not blaming the person who created the PR. You are just trying to keep the quality of the code base at the best possible. So don't be afraid to do that. It's not something negative. It's actually a moment where you can grow and learn a lot, potentially. Commenting, it's a bit more tricky. So usually here you are not explicitly approving or requesting changes. This is especially useful in case you have a team that is bigger than 3 people, because even if you are commenting, someone else could approve and then the PR could be merged. We usually do that whenever we have some doubts, but we are not sure this is really mining the stability of the code base. So maybe we miss some context, and that's why we are making we're asking something, but it's not necessary that the outcome is going to be something wrong. So in that case, we comment in advance. And also nice to have what I mentioned previously. If you comment on a PR and you know you're blocking your colleague, will be nice if you can keep an eye on possible changes. In my case, I review only at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. So whenever I do this, I try to keep an extra eye on the notifications and unblock my colleague as soon as possible. This is not necessary, but it's something I do personally because I like to do so. And then finally, we have the approving state. So when should we approve? Approving should be done whenever the PR is clearly addressing what it should, and there are no major issues minding the quality of the code base. So no crashes, no guidelines that are violated, etc. This could include clarification comments, for which an answer wouldn't really change the outcome of the PR. So for example, there is some filtering in a list that is done in a way that we never saw before, but the filtering is done properly and we have tests covering that. Then we can take the opportunity to ask, hey, what is going on here? Like, I want to know more, but it's not affecting the outcome of the PR. So we are not gonna block the PR for that. And then something we do a lot is whenever we see things that could be improved but are really nitpicking, we prefix the comment with nitpicking, and then comment it. This is an agreement we have within the team, which means whenever we do a comment in this way, you can either address it or not. It's going to be totally fine. So if you don't address it, it's going to be fine. For example, I don't know, sometimes in the test, we usually group the mocking in the first lines of a test, then we have the execution of the test, and then we have the assertion of the test. So we have a few spaces between those three groups. That's usually a need. Something that if you have, especially in a file, all aligned is nice, but it's not mandatory. And usually, if there is a nice environment and trust, those neat comments are addressed. And yeah, the final thoughts are about to remember, especially when giving feedback or when getting feedback and replying, to be nice with each other. So sometimes I saw people, using the PRs to show off something, or they take it as a competition. It's not a competition. We are a team. We are working all together into the same product, on the same features, and we have all the same goal, which is trying to make our product better, our business better, and our code base better. So this is something that can sound obvious, but it's something that we should all keep in mind, because it's not always obvious. And so, yeah. We covered the third point. I have an article on Medium. I know this is not ideal because there is no QR code, but you can easily find my profile on Medium if you want to know more. And I'm basically addressing everything that I said in this talk. And then, thanks.